Okay, so now bishop to c5 attacking this knight, and I know some of you are thinking that if black wanted to attack this knight anyway, then why he did not do this earlier? Why he give that check first? It's look like a waste of move, right? But guys, in reality, that's the whole idea. By forcing the bishop to d2, black slightly disturbs the white coordination before starting the real attack. Now the bishop sits on a square where it blocks the queen control over the d file. And it also takes away a natural square for this knight, which can be useful later. Okay, so since this knight is attacked, so Karpov defends this with bishop to c3, which is an inaccuracy because as you can see this bishop moved twice. The best move might be bringing this knight to f3 because now black can go for e5 attacking this knight, and if knight to f3 then and if e4 then you can see white can go for knight to d4, so that's why knight to c6, which is a developing move. Bishop to g2, black castle, white castle, rook to d8, and in the next move black can break through by d5 and you can see white will be better, black will be better. But after bishop to c3, yeah, let me go back. Here Wely goes for knight to e4, and guys, if you are thinking about bishop to b2, that will be a huge blunder because of bishop to b4 check, and either you go there or there. In both the cases this is losing for white. Let's suppose if knight to d2, knight takes d2, and obviously you cannot recapture with the queen, and yeah, that's all. So that's why after knight to e4 he goes for bishop to g2, and now queen to e5, creating more pressure over the knight. So that's why to defend this, and now black continues with knight to c6. Basically he increases more pressure, and obviously you can't take due to this undefended knight on c3, so that's why. Okay, so now black goes for bishop to c5, creating more pressure over the knight. So to defend this, he simply brings his knight back to e2. But guys, instead of this move, let me go back to this move. Here white can also consider this amazing move, knight to e4, which attacks this bishop. And let's suppose if black decides to exchange the knights by knight takes d4, then knight takes c5, and if queen takes c5, then simply e takes d4, and now you can see white will end up with this solid pawn structure. Okay, so in the actual game, after knight at c goes to e2, after bishop to e7, and now c5, And here you can see white gains a significant amount of space on the queen side, especially around the b6 square, while also restricting black ability to play the freeing. Basically, it's also restrict the ability of to play the move d5, and it even creates a nice outpost on d6. And basically he tries to push a5, and basically he is attacking this structure, but Karpov simply brings his rook onto the b file. And after all of this, he finally goes for d5. And you can see he is successful in equalizing the space disadvantage, and this opens lines for his pieces also. And now white can continue with the queen to d3. Queen to d3 with the idea to push e4, trying to attack this pawn structure, but instead he decides to en passant. He basically wants to open the c file, and black recaptures with the queen. But after all of this, basically this also dissolves the central pawn tension and leaves black with a very solid position. Basically, the bind has been loosened. Instead, he should focus on maintaining the tension like queen to d3 with the idea of e4, which I mentioned earlier. Now queen to c2. Maybe he wants to make a battery so that he can go for queen to c7. And in the next move, he is preparing for queen to c7. So to stop this, bishop to d6. And now queen to e4. And guys, basically that's a great move. And you can see this queen is eyeing on c6 square, which is crucial. I mean, if black is now not careful and he decides to play any move like rook to e8 so that he can create some defense over this pawn. But guys, in this position now white can go for an amazing move, knight to c6. Here white can sacrifice this knight, because if b takes c6, rook takes c6, attacking this queen as well as this bishop. And I know you are thinking about queen to b8, but what about rook takes d6, creating a discover attack on this rook? And if bishop to b7, now white will simply slides this queen to d4 so that he can defend the rook. Bishop takes g2, king takes g2, and finally queen to b7 check, king to g1, and you can see now this position is completely better for white due to this advanced rook on the 6th rank as well as an amazing outpost for this queen. White also has a passer on the b file. Okay, so in the actual game, after queen to e4, yup, here black moves his rook to a4. Here black goes for bishop to e7. Maybe the idea is to place the bishop on f6, guarding this very important diagonal. And now queen to f4, eyeing on this h6 square, queen to a6, Here black creates a battery and you can see this rook can anytime go to a1. And you can see white is now threatening to promote. So that's why bishop takes b7 and then rook takes b7 attacking this bishop. And now black simply defends his rook and finally rook takes e7. And now you can see white has two minor pieces against the rook, and let's see how Karpov converts this into a winning endgame. He firstly gives a check, then simply bishop to f1, rook to a8, and you can see what's coming next. So to stop this, the first move which comes in our mind is simply knight to c3. The idea is simple. White wants to move this king further, and if black then goes for rook to a1, then white will simply moves this bishop. But before that, since this rook is attacked, so black will now firstly attack this knight, knight to e4, f5. Black will attack this knight again, knight to f6 check, king to f8, rook takes e6, king to f7 attacking both, so rook to b6, rook at a goes to a1 creating pressure over the bishop, knight takes h7, rook takes f1 check, king to g2, rook to g1 check, king to f3. And although this position is equal due to these powerful pawns, but in reality it's not easy to hold. Even a single mistake by white will lead to a loss. So after seeing all of these complications, after rook to a8, here Karpov finds the only best move, which is g4, opening the g3 square for this knight. And if now black doubles the rook, then simply knight to g3, which also guards this bishop, and you can see now black pawns also can't attack this knight on g3. And guys, now white can give a check from e4 square by bishop to e4 check. And if black defends it by f5, that would be a mistake because here black blocks the defense of his own pawn. And white can now simply brings this bishop to f3, creating excess pressure over the pawn. And you can see now no one can defend this pawn. But in the actual game, after rook to a5, he goes for bishop to d1, preparing for this check. So to stop this, rook to c5, and now f4. And in the next move, white can go for knight to e4, which attacks this rook. But black can counter this by the move which is rook to a5. And let's suppose if white brings this bishop to f3, then simply rook to a2 check, knight to e2, rook to a3, attacking this pawn. And if let's suppose white tries to attack this rook by king to g3, then simply rook takes e3, king takes h4, rook takes f3, and you can see now this game is completely equal. But after the move f4, yup, let me go back. Here black made a mistake by rook to d5, and the problem with that move is after bishop to f3, if black tries to give a check by, let's suppose, rook to d2, simply knight to d2, and now he cannot attack this e3 pawn by the move rook to d3. And now this is a blunder because of bishop to e4 check, and in the next move black has to lose the rook. So that's why after, let me go back to the move knight to e2, he goes for king to g7. He attacks the white rook, and rook to a8. And guys, that's a mistake because now black can go for rook to d3, and basically instead of the move rook to a8, the best move for white is to go for rook to c8, so that if black goes for rook to d3, then white can easily stop this by rook to c3 supported by the knight. But after the move rook to a8, now he goes for rook to d3, he targets this pawn, and basically Karpov pushed this pawn further, rook to e3, rook to a5, rook takes e2 check, and basically here black decides to give up his rook, and then rook takes f4, and now you can see again this game is completely equal due to these pawns. Okay, so since now white is giving a check, so king to f6, and now king to f4, and you can see now white is preparing for this pawn push. Here black pushed his pawn, and you can see now black is close to promotion. And let's see what's happened next. Karpov goes for bishop to h1, rook to h4 check, king to g3, he attacks this rook, simply rook to h6, rook to b8, preparing for rook to b5. So to stop this, rook to h5, rook to b1, king to g6, bishop to f3, attacking this rook. So that's why rook to h8, bishop to g2, king to f6, preparing to centralize the king, but he simply gives a check, and then bishop goes back to h1, f5, e takes f5, e takes f5, rook to e1 check, king to f6, bishop to g2, king to g5. Okay, so bishop to h3, rook to b8, and you can see now white can easily capture this pawn, and he does this. And now he gives black gives a check, but simply king to g1, rook to b5, rook to f1, creating some pressure over the pawn. But due to this rook, you know black is safe. But king to h2, rook to a5, and you can see now black is just shuffling, and king to g3, rook to d4, bishop to e2, rook to d2, king to f3, rook to a2, rook to g2 check, king to f6, rook to g8, rook to a3 check, king to f4, rook to a4 check, king to e3, rook to e4 check, king to f3, rook to d4, bishop to a6. And now you can see king to e3, black gives a check again, but simply king to d2, rook to d5 check, bishop to d3, king to e5, king to e3, king to f6, rook to c8, king to g5, rook to a8, king to f6, bishop to c4, attacking this rook, but simply rook to c5, attacking this bishop, so king to d4, rook to c7, rook to f8 check. And let's suppose if this king goes to g5, simply bishop to e6, attacking this pawn. And if black thinks he can defend this pawn, but simply king to e4, and in the next move white is going to capture this pawn. And obviously black can't stop this, and obviously black cannot stop this due to this bishop. Okay, so in the actual game, after rook to f8 check, simply he decides to give up this pawn because he can't save this pawn. And let's see how Karpov converts this into a winning position. Now black gives a check, king to e5, rook to c7 check, bishop to e6, and you can see what's coming next. So that's why black gives a check, bishop to d5, rook to c7, rook to g5, rook to d7, bishop to c6, attacking this rook, so this rook has to move, rook to g6, king to d8, king to d6, and you can see now black king is in a stalemate condition. So black now takes advantage of this by sacrificing his rook by rook to d7 check. And obviously you can't take, because then you can see that will be a stalemate because there is no legal move left for the black. So that's why after rook to d7 check, he goes for king to c5. And now it's important for black not to leave this 6th rank because this pins the bishop. But due to time trouble, here Wely blunders by moving this rook to e5, and Karpov takes benefit of this by bishop to b7 check. And you can see since this d file is covered, so the only move is king to b8 and then finally rook to d8 checkmate. What a game, guys. In this game, Karpov shows no flashy tactics, just pure control, patience and class. That's how a legend wins. Like this video, I will see you in the next one. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.